everyone, this is my conflict map of Mali. So I sort of tried to make it more simple because the situation in Mali can be seen in many different ways. So this map sort of shows it through the lens of political representation and governance and distribution of resources being the center factors that sort of have triggered instability, which then triggered violence and so on. So political instability I put here, and that can have a positive or negative relationship in regards to distribution of resources. Distribution of resources then can have a negative relationship, which can then lead to marginalization, or it can have a positive relationship, which can lead to stability and increase the level of peace, which can increase political governance, which can then have a positive effect on distribution of resources. So I put in a reinforcing signifier here, because this positive relationship can be reinforcing, but it can also be a negative relationship, which can be reinforcing. So, and then we have marginalization can lead to instability, which can then lead to the level of peace, a negative effect on peace. And then the level of peace can also have an effect on stability, and that a negative level of peace also can lead to instability. Instability then can lead to ethnic tensions, and ethnic tensions can also lead to instability as well. And ethnic tensions, they then can lead to violence, which then leads to reprisals, which can then lead back to instability, which is signified by this red color as another reinforcer. And then also within that, you also see another reinforcer in the purple color, which signifies that instability leads to ethnic tensions, which leads to violence, which then leads to instability, which continues the cycle. And it can also go the other way around. So if we go down here, back where we were at reprisals, then we get to grievance. At this point, grievance can then lead to violence, which can then reinforce itself through the cycle, leading to reprisals, leading to grievance, and so on. So I represented another reinforcing factors, because the cycle is obviously reinforcing itself. And then once you get to grievance, you can then it may lead to extremist leadership, which then causes an increase in violence. So we see another reinforcing cycle here as well. So at this point, extremist leadership can have various effects. One, it can lead to violence, as I mentioned. Two, it can create more instability. And it's also interesting because instability can also be a contributing factor to it. So that's sort of a reciprocal relationship there. In the case of Mali, extremist leadership led to minority group cooperation with the Tuareg because of the violence, which is also signified here. So extremist leadership and violence led to minority group cooperation of the Tuareg as far as rebellion goes, because their rebellion was essentially hijacked by Al-Qaeda in Al-Maghrib and Ansar Dine, as well as a number of other Islamic militia groups. So at that point, they were seeing a lot of violence faced against them, and they decided that cooperation might be the best mechanism for eventually getting to stability. So once cooperation happened, we saw international regional interference occurring. This as a response to cooperation, also as a response to the existence of extremist leadership. So existence of extremist leadership can lead to international regional interference because of a concern regarding instability in that area and perhaps strengthening of Islamic militia groups. And then international regional interference can also lead to sort of a strengthening of extremist leadership and to more violence. So I put a B here because an increase in extremist leadership thus leads to minority group cooperation, which thus leads to interference, international regional interference. So this increase leads to a decrease in, and I guess you could say strife, minority group strife, an increase in cooperation, which then leads to an increase in international regional interference. So international regional interference has about 3 or 4 lines here. So the first line I drew was connecting it to stability. International and regional interference has an effect on stability in that it can have a positive or negative effect depending on the situation, the context, and the way it's carried out, as well as a number of other factors, including historical factors, etc. Okay, what else do we have here? International regional interference can also affect political governance in a positive or negative way. Let's see. Oh, and also political governance can also affect whether there is a presence of international and regional interference. So in the case of Mali, the political governance structure did want international and regional interference, and so they went about contacting those bodies. But in other cases, that doesn't always happen. So there may be a negative relationship there. The international and regional groups may want to intervene, but the political structure is reluctant or hesitant for that. International regional interference also obviously affects the level of peace, and this can be in a positive or negative way. And that can lead to whichever cycle is produced. So typically when this line is negative, then we see this negative reinforcement happening again, which leads to more violence, and then leads to more reinforcement, and more, and it goes on and on. Because if that's a positive influence, then we sort of see where we cut off part of this graph. We don't see any marginalization. We see positive stability, which then decreases ethnic tensions, which then decreases violence, reprisals, grievance, the existence of extremist leadership. Minority group cooperation doesn't happen in the positive instances because